last weekend I went to my first convention ever, which was BroadwayCon. It was the first ever BroadwayCon and I had an amazing time. I am definitely going to be going next year. So today I just want to kind of give you guys a little bit of recap of what I did at BroadwayCon and kind of my experience. And I also just want to talk a little bit more in depth about some things that I didn't really get to talk about in my vlogs that I was filming as I was at BroadwayCon. If you have not watched my vlogs from BroadwayCon, they will be linked down below. And if you want to see even more from BroadwayCon, even more of the whole experience of that awesome dorky weekend, you can watch my friend Michelle's vlogs, which will also be linked down below. And without any further ado, let's go! So on day one of BroadwayCon, I started my day by going to registration, which I probably should have gotten there earlier. I got there at 9 when it was actually supposed to start, and I was already on like a crazy line, and there were like a million lines, and it was just this huge, insane crowd. And registration is where they give you your badge and like a bag of little goodies, and my favorite thing that was in that little goodie bag was the actual official playbill of BroadwayCon. And it wasn't like they mocked up like a playbill to be like, oh yeah, it's Broadway, like our program is a playbill. No, it was a legit, real playbill because BroadwayCon was actually sponsored by Playbill. And after that, I got lost for the first of many times in the New York Hilton Midtown Hotel. I'm just gonna leave it at this and say that that hotel is unbelievably confusing. But anyway, I made my way over to one of the meeting rooms and I went to the I Love Everything meetup, which was just a meetup of people like saying like, these are my favorite shows, these are my favorite performers. It was just like a solid hour of geeking out. And at that meetup, the first people that I met that were like sitting around me in the room were from Europe. The girl that was sitting next to me was from Germany, I believe, and she'd come to America a million times to go to conventions. And the girls that were sitting in front of me were from France. And as we were going around the room like saying our favorite shows and our favorite performers, a lot of people were saying like their name, where they were from. There were plenty of people from out of state, but like still within the US. There was one woman who was from Toronto, and upon hearing the person from Australia, everybody in the room was just like, okay, you win. And it was just like so cool to be in a room of fellow dorks from around the country and around the world. So after that, I had myself a frolic in the marketplace, which was just this big open area where they had a bunch of booths from various like charities, foundations, and like Broadway brands, I guess. Like Playbill had a booth where they were selling mugs and shirts and whatever, but they also had this like free photo booth where the backdrop was like a Playbill magazine, and they had all these signs that said like Future Elphaba, Ingenue, stuff like that. I actually took a picture there with the sign that said #BroadwayCon just to kind of commemorate the event. The only item of merch that I actually bought was sheet music to The King and I. I don't consider myself to be like a collector of sheet music, but music is the thing that I do every day of my life. And so when I acquire like new books of sheet music, I'm just kind of like building up my own library, if that makes any kind of sense. And I actually recently saw The King and I on Broadway with Kelly O'Hara. It was just so like, I loved it so much, and I love Kelly O'Hara. She is soprano goals, and I've loved the music from that show for a long time, so I was just like, okay, that is mine. The marketplace is also where they were doing like the photo sessions and the autograph sessions. I'm not really a big like photo and autograph person. I've actually only stage doored at a Broadway show once, and it was at If Then, because Idina Menzel is my queen, and I was like, I need to be breathing the same air as her, and I need her to sign my playbill, and just Idina! After I had my little frolic in the marketplace, I made my way over to the line for the Deaf West Spring Awakening panel, and I was sitting in the hallway before that panel for about an hour because like you do have to show up early to get in the room for these things. And at BroadwayCon, they actually didn't clear the rooms between panels, so you either had to like sneak in early or be waiting outside like an hour early to like strike as soon as the panel ended. But anyway, it actually wasn't that bad at all to be waiting online for a panel or an event for like an hour, because everybody would just like geek out with total strangers. It was just like so cool to be surrounded by a million other dorky people who love all the same things you do. So it was really easy to like just like strike up a conversation, and just like that killed time like nothing else. The Deaf West panel was interesting. It was incredibly eye-opening, and I just loved every minute of it. I would recommend any of the panels that I saw while I was actually at BroadwayCon if they have videos of them up, which I actually think they do. But if you were going to watch any of them, watch the Deaf West Spring Awakening panel, because it was just mind-blowing and interesting and so crazy and cool. After the Deaf West panel, I made my way over to the main stage area where they were going to do opening ceremonies, which was to be followed by the Hamilton panel. The line for the main stage before the opening ceremonies is possibly the most disorganized 5 fire hazard I have ever seen in my life. I'm not gonna go into a whole rant about this because honestly I could yell about that for like 10 minutes, but I actually wound up getting a pretty good seat for the opening ceremonies, and the opening ceremonies were a show. Like, the actual opening ceremonies started with the two women from Mischief Management just kind of ringing in BroadwayCon because they were the ones that thought it up and created the whole thing. But after that they did this kind of mini musical with Broadway stars, of course, about like a drama club that like wanted to put on a Broadway convention, and so it just kind of like looped into the whole thing. After the opening ceremonies, I stayed put in the main stage area for the Hamilton panel, which was another panel that I was absolutely dying to go to. I've been a fan of Lin-Manuel Miranda since 2008 when In the Heights came out. I'm not saying that to be a hipster, like, I liked him before he was popular and before Hamilton, like, no. It's just that I've been a long time fan, so seeing him on a panel was just like, oh yes! And the cast of Hamilton really just is squad goals. But what I remember most about the Hamilton panel is something that would go on to be kind of a running theme across all the main stage panels, which was the don't drop the P incident. I'm not gonna do like a full explanation of what that is. If you want to know what it is, just Google it. I'm sure a million people have tweeted and posted about it. But basically for the main stage shows, instead of having ASL interpreters, they had captions on the screens that were flanking the stage. And there was also a screen that faced the stage and faced the performers that acted as a teleprompter. But during the panels, they could just see like their own faces that were being recorded on the cameras and what was being displayed on the screens on the side of the stage, as well as the live captions. Because it was a person and not like some crazy computer typing out the captions, and they were typing them out in real time, and they had no idea what the people on stage were gonna say next. Obviously there were some mistakes, and some of them were unfortunate, like the dropping of the P during the Hamilton panel, but this was something that went on to happen at other main stage panels, and it just turned into BroadwayCon versus the teleprompter, and it was some of the funniest shit I've ever seen in my life. And what was even better than the fact that there's like an unfortunate typo being displayed to like 2,000 people was that because theater people are, well, theater people, they just dragged the living shit out of the teleprompter. So not only did this person who's typing out the live captions type out a very unfortunate typo in front of a lot of people, they now have to type out captions for the people who are roasting them on stage. Anyway, the Hamilton panel was hilarious, it was interesting, and again, that cast is just squad goals. And after the Hamilton panel, I decided to go home because I was really tired. I had a really long day at that point. I was planning on staying to some later panels, like until like the middle of the night, but I was just drained of energy, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna be here tomorrow, it's all good, which didn't end up happening, but we'll get into that in a minute. So as I was walking out of the Hamilton panel, I was just kind of like gathering my stuff up, like fiddling with my selfie stick or something, and all of a sudden I hear really loud, like in my general direction, someone shout, Amy! And you know how like you think you hear somebody yell your name, but then you're like, that's probably not somebody calling my name? If you ever hear somebody shout your name at you, and you are instantly sure that yes, it is your name, and that they are indeed shouting at you, it's probably the most terrifying thing in the world. Like, the first thought that ran through my head was, oh my god, am I being arrested? Never committed a crime in my life, but apparently I'm being arrested, okay. So I turn to the side and I see there's this girl that's just like beaming, grinning at me. And I forgot exactly what she said, but I think it was something along the lines of, I watch all of your videos, like I'm a huge fan, and so my mind shifts from holy shit, I'm being arrested, to holy shit, how do you know who I am? What? So we took a picture, I did a little bit of vlogging with her, and it was honestly really cool. I actually got recognized a grand total of 4 times at BroadwayCon. I knew that there were followers of Theater Commandments that were going to BroadwayCon, but I didn't really expect that people would recognize and walk up to me, and then it happened, and it was the coolest thing ever. I actually vlogged with 3 out of the 4 of them. The 4th one that recognized me, I think we were either on the escalator or like on a line or in a crowd. Basically, we were in a situation where it would have been completely inappropriate to like just whip out a selfie stick and start vlogging, but I've said this probably a million times, but my favorite thing in the world to do on Theater Commandments, and on YouTube as well, but really not nearly as much, is to interact with all of you. I love when you guys message me about anything. Like, I've gotten more than a few messages of people just saying like, I don't know why I feel like I want to tell you this, but I just got cast in a show. And to which my response always is, because I am a proud theater mama who loves all of your theater kids to death. And that is absolutely true. But the thing is, while I love interacting with you guys and I do it every single day, day on the blog and on the website and on other forms of social media, I see numbers and follower counts and subscriber counts and messages, but I've never gotten to actually like meet somebody and meet a real person who is one of the people on the other side of the screen. So thank you so much to the 4 people that did walk up and say hi. So in the week leading up to Broadway Con, and of course on Friday night after day 1 of Broadway Con, all the weather people in New York State were going, oh my god, it's Snowmageddon, oh my god, it's the snowpocalypse, Snowzilla is coming, run for your lives! And my parents were like, you know, if you go to Manhattan on Saturday, you might get stuck there. And I was hearing all these weather reports and hearing them say that and being like, no, I'm not. Every time it snows in New York City, everybody loses their shit. Like, it doesn't snow every goddamn year. So I'm hearing them be like, oh my god, it's the worst snowstorm since 1996, and I just flicked my glasses off in that maneuver. And I've heard them say this so many times, and it doesn't turn out to be any kind of anything, that I'm just like, yeah, they're crying wolf, like it's bullshit. And then on Friday night, as I was watching news, it actually became apparent that this was actually going to be a severe snowstorm, but my brain was still going like, I've gone to rehearsals during the blizzard, I've gone to school during many a blizzard, because New York City public schools, and CUNY for that matter as well, do not close for anything. Like, I'm going to start a series called Amy Tries to Do Things in Natural Disasters, because I actually went to a rehearsal in Manhattan about like 3-ish days after Hurricane Sandy. So I'm just like, okay, even if it snows a lot, like that's not gonna stop me from going to Manhattan, like I'll be fine. But then I start hearing that they're gonna shut down L train service, like elevated train service, and that they're gonna shut down bus service, and then I get like that blaring phone alarm that's like state of emergency, and I was just like, oh, okay, I guess we're not geeking out on Saturday, okay. So I did not make it to Broadway Con on Saturday, because while it actually might have been possible for me to get there in the morning before everything was shut down, I would have gotten stuck in Manhattan. So I kind of made the decision to stay my ass in Queens on Saturday. And later on that day, they actually did this thing that I have never heard of happening, and it kind of made me feel like I was living in some kind of dystopian novel. So the mayor comes on TV for like a press conference to say like, yup, it's snow, yes, it's dangerous, stay in your homes, blah, 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 blah. And he said also, we are instituting a travel ban as of 2:30 p.m. You cannot drive on any road, street, whatever in New York City until the travel ban is lifted. And what wound up happening is that we actually did get a blizzard. Literally 2.5 feet fell all at once. So because the snowstorm was so bad, when day 3 rolled around, I truly had no idea if I was gonna make it into Manhattan that day. But in my mind I was like, well, the underground trains are running, and the train that I would have to take, even if it was all sunshine and rainbows, runs underground. So if I can just get myself to a train station, then I'm good. Because they announced that they were gonna slowly restore service throughout the city, like to the buses, the elevated trains, NJ Transit, LIRR, Metro North, all of that. But I was leaving my house right as they were about to start restoring it. And if you live in New York City, you know that the MTA doesn't do shit in a timely fashion. So I'm just like, okay, I guess I'm gonna have to walk all the way to a subway station. And I live in a weird part of Queens, like I live almost in Brooklyn, but the part of Queens that I live in has an absolute shit ton of buses, but the closest subway stations are like 1.5 miles away. And so I was like, you know what? They lifted the travel ban at 7 a.m. that day, but nobody's gonna take their car out. I'll just walk in the street all the way to the train station. I'm gonna do whatever it takes to get myself into Manhattan. And the reason, by the way, that my only option really was to walk in the street, it's because nobody had shoveled out the sidewalks. Because when 2.5 feet of snow falls all at once, that's kind of really hard to shovel. So long story short, I did end up getting on a bus, and then once I was on the train, everything was good. But by the time that I did make it into Manhattan, about 2 hours later, I felt like I had just made like an epic pilgrimage, because New York City public transit is kind of a piece of crap on a regular day. If you add snow into that mix, you are just asking for disaster. So once I got into the hotel, I just kind of like changed out of my snow clothes, checked my jacket, and then went about my merry way. And the first thing that I went to that day was the Seth Rudetsky disaster panel. I have to be honest, I knew nothing of the show Disaster. I just wanted to go see Seth Rudetsky because I have listened to his Sirius XM radio show for years. I love him to death. He is just such a sassy nerd, and I love all of it. That panel was actually a little bit differently because a lot of people on the panel did wind up singing like a song or two, and they were telling funny stories, and Seth Rudetsky was of course hilarious. And right after that panel, I once again stayed right where I was and went to the Something Rotten panel on the main stage. And and I very luckily did get to see Something Rotten last year. That show is hilarious, it is awesome, it is just a tremendous show, and it's especially very funny if you're a performer yourself. And that panel was so funny because you have three guys who are hilarious talking about a hilarious show, and it was just awesome. So after the Something Rotten panel, I didn't really have plans for a couple of hours, so I decided to go and get myself some food, but I didn't want to actually go outside the hotel to get food because that would mean I would have to put on my extra layer of pants, I would have to put my snow boots back on, I would have to get my coat from Coat Check, and I was just not feeling that. So I decided to just kind of like bite the bullet and go to the restaurant that was downstairs, which was very expensive. I literally dropped like 20 bucks on lunch, which is something I never do. Like, I buy lunch all the time, but lunch is normally like $5 to $10. So spending 20 bucks on a meal as a college student is just like, it's so much money. But before I actually made my way downstairs, I met up with my friends Megan and Michelle, who were cosplaying as two of the Heathers, and I wound up hanging out with them for the rest of the day, and we just kind of like frolicked from panel to panel together. So we had our very expensive lunch, which was really good, but it really was just like a knife in the heart to like my broke college student self to pay $20 for lunch. After that, we went back upstairs to see the Les Mis panel, and the Les Mis panel was not with the most recent cast, it was actually from people from the original Broadway cast, and that was really cool because they're like telling stories of like the out-of-town tryouts and like this, that, and the other thing, and like just kind of the whole concept of bringing that show over from England to the US, from the West End to Broadway. So that panel was super interesting and actually kind of like unexpectedly funny. After that, we stayed in that room for the Belt Your Face Off sing-along. I don't think that's what it was actually called, but that's what I'm calling it. They were playing music from Wicked, In the Heights, Rent, Newsies. It was awesome. You have like this room of like 200 people who all know the words to the same songs. Like, it was honestly super cool, and again, like a nerdy dream to just be in a room of total strangers who all love the same things that you do and just singing with them. After that sing-along, we kind of cut out a few minutes early to make our way back over to the main stage for the closing ceremonies. This time, the line situation was much more organized than it was for the opening ceremonies, thank God. And the closing ceremonies weren't really the same as the opening, like it wasn't entirely a mini musical, although they did incorporate parts of that like original mini musical. So it was kind of like the opening ceremonies were Act 1 and then the closing ceremonies were Act 2, if that made any sense. And then they had performances from people like Lena Hall. Of course, the women from Mischief Management who created all of BroadwayCon spoke again at the closing ceremonies. Anthony Rapp spoke. It was amazing. And that is basically a very long overview of my BroadwayCon experience. So before I finish this video, I just want to kind of talk about two other things. I talked about this earlier in this video, but one of the coolest things that happened at BroadwayCon, and one of the coolest things that's kind of happened to me ever, was getting recognized by fans. And might I add that I met 4 of you? Only 1 of you called me Amy. The other 3 of you called me Theater Commandments or asked me if I was from Theater Commandments. Yes, I am. Yes, that is the blog that I run. But hi, my name is Amy. If you see me in public, you can just call me Amy. Kind of makes things a lot easier. But anyway, again, that was a crazy, awesome, surreal experience. But I actually had just one of these mind-blowing, like, small world occurrences that happened, like, surrounding one of the fans that I did meet. So on Sunday, I met a girl as I was leaving lunch and heading back upstairs to the convention hall. And so we stopped, we took a picture, we vlogged a little bit, and then we just kind of both went about our merry way. And then a little bit later, I get a Tumblr message from Girl with a Lesson Plan, who she follows Theater Commandments, but I also follow her on my personal blog because she's a super cool English teacher who just kind of looks like she could drag a bitch for an hour using only Shakespearean insults. And so she sends me a message and says, "You met one of my former students at BroadwayCon and she was really excited." And I was just looking at this message on my phone like, what the actual hell? So that was just insane. And to close out this video, I just have to give a huge shout out to everybody at BroadwayCon who made that event deaf and hard of hearing friendly. I'm very much all about diversity, inclusiveness, and all of that in theater. I believe that theater is for everybody to enjoy, not just a select few. Every panel was interpreted in ASL. They normally had about 2 to 3 interpreters in the room, and the number of interpreters that was in the room like depended on the size of the room, obviously. And then on the main stage where they couldn't just use interpreters because the room was so huge, they would need like 10 interpreters. theaters, they had all the panels closed captioned. So I just want to say, like, go you to whoever made sure that that happened. Because again, we want everybody to enjoy theater, not just a select few. And that concludes this video. Thank you so much to everybody at BroadwayCon for the amazing experience. I will be back next year. Thank you to everybody who walked up and said hi and took a picture with me and vlogged with me and kind of made me feel like a cool little dork. Go watch the vlogs from BroadwayCon. Follow me on all the links in the description. Comment, like, and subscribe, and I'll see y'all next Friday.